You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series that syndicates for the A-List Online. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. Hope you're well. The interview subject coming up for you is Aaron Pauley from the outfit of Mice and Men. The reason for the chat is to talk about the group's new EP. It's out now. Well, tomorrow. Today's the 25th of February. It'll be out on the 26th. So by the time many of you listen to this, it'll already be out there. Should say what it's called too, shouldn't I? It's called Timeless. So let's have a listen to what Aaron has to say. Here we go.
Hey, how you doing?
Hi, mate. How's things?
Good. Just in the middle of moving, so up to my eyeballs in cardboard.
Jesus, so you've got this on at the moment, and meaning the interviews, the phono grinders or the video grinders or whatever we're going to call them these days, on top of doing my most deplorable task, the most deplorable task I can think of myself, which is moving house.
It is. It's not an enviable process. I haven't had anybody hit me up being like, "Damn, I wish I was doing that."
No, and that's when, those mates, it might have been in the past when you shouted them a night out or something like that. They say, I'll pay you back one day, I'll help you do something. And this is those moments in time when you go, hey, I actually need some help. And, they don't look at Messenger or something, they're conveniently quiet.
Well, I hired movers.
Oh, yeah, you got to do it, though, haven't you? My wife enjoys doing stuff like that. I can't stand it. I mean, I'll move into a house, but packing everything up, I'd rather just chuck stuff out, to be honest with you, and start again.
A lot of stuff gets thrown out.
Oh, yes, yeah. So how are the interviews been going for you? Because I take it you've been doing this for a week or so now, a bit longer maybe.
Yeah, they've been fun. It's always fun to talk about music with people who care about music, because I think it takes a certain type of individual to devote their life to journalism, let alone covering music. So it's always fun.
You're literally, in 600 plus interviews that I've done, you're the first person to mention that. I want to congratulate you on mentioning that, because I've got to tell you, I mean, it's some days it's not easy, and not because I don't love doing it, but
No, it's because it's your passion, and anytime you start making a living or feeding yourself doing the thing you love, it fundamentally changes your relationship with it.
yeah,
But it doesn't really change the underlying passion or the thing that kind of makes your ears perk up, gets that little spark in your brain going.
agreed. Yeah, and the other thing I'll say is, majority of my interviews have been with people such as yourself, near headline status worthy bands, this sort of thing. And I've got to say, everybody to a person has been so cool. There's like this brotherhood and sisterhood with heavy music, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's built around I think it's an outlet for aggression, it's an outlet for loneliness, it's an outlet for uncertainty. It's an outlet, it's a creative outlet, it's a form of expression. And I think as the cliche goes, music is the universal language. Well, language is for communicating, and people that speak that same language without necessarily understanding why they relate to something, it's kind of all about that connection. It's not, music's not so much about what you hear when you're not a musician. When you're a musician, you get to listen to music, and you kind of get the mathematics sort of side of it, and that's kind of like a special treat. But music, for the most part, I don't think people listen to as much as they feel.
Yeah, I just wrote a press release for a band last night where I said more or less what you've just said then, different phrasing, but and that's the thing, we relate to it in a very similar way. And if we can understand how other people relate to music. And look, that's I'll talk about your new EP now, because this is your third venture with you singing and playing bass. So I've got to
Mm-hmm.
commend you on that, because I too play bass, and I try to sing. And I watched you perform at Download down in Melbourne in 2018. And I've got to tell you,
That
it was
was a
one of the,
fun show. That was a fun show.
well, 2 points on that. The first thing was, I thought that it only started to feel like a festival when you guys got up on stage, I've got to say. And that's no disrespect to the bands that came before you, but the level of professionalism and you've seasoned festival veterans, and that shone through. Okay, and then of course Sabaton came on, I think, after you guys over on the stage next year, and that's when it just kicked off. It was like, hey, we're in.
with the big ass tank.
I don't think they brought the tank down. I think we tend to get, and I joked with Eric Danielson from Watain about this. We tend to get the Ramones version of the production down in Australia because it costs so
Oh
much to bring
yeah,
everything
because
down.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that once we did a bunch of festivals with Sabaton, I think like a couple years ago. And I just remember one time rolling up to the stage and I was just like, what is that? And it's a full-blown tank drum riser, and it
Yep.
is the coolest thing to see. It's like, man, like I want that. Andy, how do we get a tank?
Yeah, I've spoken to Pa about that. I actually had a chat to him when he was stuck in Moscow when COVID first hit and they were touring Russia. And I spoke to him about that exact thing, meaning the tank side of things. And I think I said something along the lines of Judas Priest might have their Harley, but you guys have got a tank and nobody beats a tank.
For sure. Except maybe Amon Amarth's dragons.
I haven't even, yeah.
They have dragons that they wheel out that shoot fire at their mouth.
Oh,
And
shit,
I'm like,
yeah.
damn. And all we have is like, I'm looking around. I'm like, we have risers and we've got us.
Yeah. But that was the
I think
thing.
I think it's all about the energy you put out.
Yeah.
I think when we all step on stage, there's a very sort of intense energy that we feel. And then it doesn't even necessarily come about like in rehearsal and practice as much, but there's just like this like put it down sort of like feeling. And I miss it. I miss it a lot.
We do too. Trust me. It was something. I'm in my 40s these days, and my gig going days, I wouldn't say they're behind me, but they're few and far between with commitments to children and professional stuff and all the rest of it. And meaning that I can't help but go to a gig and have a few bevies. It's your outlet. It's like going to the football and having a hot dog. It's what you do there. If you don't drink anywhere else, you drink at the venues. This sort of thing when the bands are playing, and without that, you don't have part of your outlet. And you feel like part of you is missing. But look, I just want to come back to a point I was making earlier about playing bass and singing at the same time, because that's what I noticed about your download performance is the intensity that you bring to the show. Because I wasn't, to be honest, I wasn't familiar with the band with your previous singer. I've only got to know you guys with you
Mhm.
up front. But the bass lines that you are playing these days in combination with the vocal cadence you're using, my only question for you is how are you fucking doing it? Because it's intense and it's you're on point though.
I hadn't played bass live since the middle of I think 2019 when I had to have
Uh-huh.
surgery on my back.
Okay.
A lot of it, like, and it's funny because you're the second person that asked me today about the bass and vocals. The truth is, I practice both a lot, not together. I don't ever practice playing and singing together, but I practice the vocal lines and I practice the bass parts. And when I was playing bass live, I would just go on stage and I would turn the part of my brain that is not autopilot. I would just disconnect that and I would allow autopilot to kind of take over the technical side of it. And whatever my hand is doing or whatever my mouth and throat is doing. And it was like a lot of times it felt like I was kind of the foreman, just observing and making sure that I was doing the right thing. But as soon as I would try and consciously think about what I was playing or consciously think about what I was singing, I'd mess it up. So a lot of it is
Yes.
just you drill it, you drill it, you drill it, and then when you go on stage, your hands just fly where they're supposed to because you've put in the work enough. And as soon as I put the human element back in it, I mess it up.
Mm. I'm hearing you loud and clear because, as I say, I do something similar, and I just haven't put in the hours that I suppose the tens, if not thousands, of hours that you've had to do alongside of the live performance. But yeah, if you're thinking you're stinking, I think Alex from Cannibal Corpse said that stuff. You should be when you're performing, you should be thinking about the brand of beer you want to drink and the type of pizza you want to order afterwards. That's actually the only thinking you should be doing.
that's actually that is not an unwise statement. I think if you can get to a point where you're thinking more about how the show is connecting rather than technically what you are doing in that moment, then I think
Mm,
you're not losing the forest for the trees. You know what I mean? If you
mm,
start focusing on every little myopic thing that you're doing, you'll end up missing the fact that like there's kind of a greater importance than like technically impressing somebody or by singing something perfectly. I've seen a lot of like perfect performances that didn't really like move me or do, what I'm sure that the performer intended. I think
mm.
it's because it's a conversation. You have to make sure that you're not just orating. You have to make sure that you're listening and receiving what the audience is giving you too. Otherwise, you're just grandstanding. You're soapboxing. You're not actually having a dialogue.
Yeah, you're not trying to connect with people. I get that, and I
No.
get you do that almost better than anybody else out there at the moment these days, actually. So, look, I have heard two songs from Timeless. So I've heard Obsolete and the title track, and look, and they're on point. And I have done a comparison between the band of the past and the band now, and I feel like you're a lot heavier, and it's a lot more intense, and it's more direct, which is of course going to
Mhm.
connect with people faster. But I guess my question for you after that statement is that do you feel a sense of relief, accomplishment, or is it just something else when you look at the band's journey over the past 5 years and now that you've arrived at this point with the EP?
Um, I think, at least for me personally, I feel like I've rounded a corner where the accomplishment comes more intrinsically, than external validation. I've got to a point where the hilariously mean comments make me laugh instead of like wound me. And I've got, I think
Yeah.
you get to a point where um you understand that you shouldn't really worry too much about what the result is going to be from what you're doing. But if you just worry about the intent behind what you're doing more so than the result, you'll usually end up getting close to the results you want. You know, it's kind of like if you're firing a bow and arrow, don't it's not as important to focus on the target or where the target's at than it is to focus on what your own hands are doing at first. And I think that that sort of philosophy kind of extends to that.
I had a chat to Tino I think it was on the eve of the release of Defy. It might have even been a couple of months beforehand.
Mhm.
He didn't sound nervous though about what was ahead of you guys because it was the first album with you singing,
Mhm.
and you guys must have had a lot of faith in each other that you could do this because I can't. How many bands can you remember of switch singers? And it's gone from mediocre to worse. But with you guys, I feel like, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, I feel like you're a stronger unit these days.
Thanks, man. I think, we knew that music was going to be how we were going to get through any sort of adversity or challenge that we were going to face. If something comes up and we have the ability to create music, that's usually where we find a lot of our selves, is through those creative endeavors and stuff. I feel like um, the biggest thing for us was, it wasn't, we have a lot of trust and faith in each other, and we also have a lot of trust and faith in our fans.
Mm.
And again, we weren't worried about the result of whether or not our fans going to like this. Is the band still going to be viable? Are we not going to get the same sort of live opportunities anymore? Are we going to like see a decline? We didn't really worry about that. We just worried about our intention. And for us, the most pure intention of continuing the band was, this means a lot to a lot of people, and it means a lot to us. And if we feel like we can put in the due diligence to not only uphold the legacy of what these live songs mean, because you don't want to be a karaoke band, you don't want to go on stage and it's just a shell of what it means to other people. You don't want to um, we didn't want to tarnish the legacy at all like that. And so we put in a lot of work and then realized, like, we do got this. And so it's just about um, there is no weak link in the chain. Everybody makes sure that we, when we are feeling a little weak, that we make sure that we reach out. It's a very, like, very, very, very tight core unit.
You mentioned something earlier about the feedback. I suppose you'd call it that comments, trolling, virtually the same thing. And I imagine near to 100% of that, to a margin of an error, would be over social media toward you. Literally, nobody would say the things that you probably read over social media to your
No,
face.
no, because it would be entirely unnecessary. You know what I mean? It's like it's easy when you can treat music or art like Yelp, and you just leave a Yelp review. I didn't like it. Oh, I hope the chef sees this. It's like, but I'm not the chef, and I don't care. And the best, most, like, ridiculous or like vile or mean, those get screenshotted and sent to the group chat. It's yeah, it's funny. And at the same time, I don't take myself so seriously that I'm like above somebody trolling me. I think it's hilarious personally. It's And granted, I haven't at all, I feel like, been subjected to like online abuse or anything like that. So there's definitely like extremes of that, but but somebody leaving a funny, hateful, mean comment, about this is dog shit, or something. Just
Mm.
it just makes me laugh. And it's just a blessing that anybody would talk about it in the first place.
Mm.
That somebody would think, oh, this is a good use of my time to write this here. It obviously means that you're doing something, that somebody wants to talk about, positively or negatively. So it's cool to just even be in my 30s and still be a part of any conversation to do with music.
Oh God, yeah. Especially with COVID now. So that's the question for you: is how did you guys concoct the songs on the EP? Was it your
Zoom. This Zoom.
mm,
Because now you can Zoom, people can be on their DAWs, which is short for digital audio workstation, which is like Pro Tools, or we use Logic. And you can just work. You can work remotely. You can take control of somebody else's computer and drag around stuff. And for this EP, we all everybody, we song wrote together. We handled a lot of like what you would call like production together in terms of like the songwriting, the recording, things like that. And then I did the mixing and mastering, so it was something we all just did in house, and it was a cool creative process.
if you did the mixing and mastering, then I'll commend you again for that, because that was one of the notable aspects of this EP is
Oh,
how
thank you.
it sounds crystal clear. And I always use the iPhone as the barometer, if you like,
Oh yeah.
because if you can hear it over there and you can hear it, like the difference or the delta between how it sounds with these in or with a great pair of headphones and over the iPhone is, I don't think the mix has done a great job, to be quite frank, because it's you lose a lot of the nuance. And we like to listen to music on the go, like in the
a
car,
hundred
that sort of thing.
percent
So
My One of the biggest tests I do is I play it on a tiny little speaker and I walk in the other room and I go, can I hear enough of this that if I didn't know what it was, I'd be interested enough to try and find out? And there's like but yeah, the iPhone, how many people will listen to a song for the first time on their phone? That's
mm,
something I check. And that's a lot to do with mixing, a lot to do with mastering. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm in a band with incredibly talented people that can send me great audio to work with.
mm,
um, and it's cool because at the same time, there weren't studios open. The studio that we've done the last, couple, or the studio that we did Earth and Sky in, Hybrid Studios, is closed now. Josh Wilbur still does like work out of his spot, but with lockdowns and COVID and stuff, it's like we kind of turned to our old skill sets. I used to produce bands like before I was ever in Of Mice and Men as like a side job when I was in my old band.
mm.
So to kind of like rely on old tools, it felt a little bit like I don't know, like primordial in a way, where it's like you have to use your creativity in order to survive. I did an interview where I just talked about that. Somebody asked me, they said, what's one piece of advice you give to people? And I'd say, honestly, like find something creative to do and just spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day doing that. Because there's an ancient part of our reptilian brain that needs to be creative in order to survive. That's why we got out of the caves, and like built civilizations and stuff. But now we're at a point where technologically everything is pretty set, for the most part. If you're watching this, there's a good chance you have access to clean water, to food, to shelter, to
Mhm.
security. You're not fighting off wild animals. Well, actually, in Australia, you do. You guys have the most wild. I think it's like the most deadly animals, right, on the planet.
Without a doubt, yeah, I've checked that actually, and I don't think we understand. We are so used to it. So there will be like literally just this week gone, we've had rain, and of course, when it finishes raining, I live near the cane fields, so I don't know what the
Yeah.
equivalent would be, maybe Florida or something like that in the United
Oh
States.
yeah.
And you see snakes on the road; they slither away when you're driving past, and they're eastern browns. They're not taipans are the worst. They're up north. They are
Yeah.
thought to be naturally aggressive, instinctually aggressive.
Oh yeah.
In Sydney, you've got which is built on a sandstone plateau, Sydney funnel-web spider, which is effectively a dinosaur and one of the most
Yeah.
lethal killing machines. Certainly, the power to weight ratio in those things is unsurpassed. And
Hmm.
crocodiles and shit, and largely, but that's I think I was talking to Kurt from Metal Church about this because he asked why we don't basically live above. the tropics, and I said it's too dangerous. We just
Hmm.
can't. Like it's why Darwin's only got 110,000 people or something like that, and you just
Yeah,
can't do it.
yeah. Oh, and the drop bears.
The drop bears, yes, the mythical drop bears. Yeah, I
I
love
remember
how.
the first. I remember the first time I ever went to Oz. One of the first things somebody warned me about was the drop bears, and I was like, doesn't sound real. However, I'm not going to rule it out because we're in Australia, and I like. I seen like you guys have like the what are like the orb weavers that end up being like the size of
Yeah,
your face.
yeah, those ones. Yes, indeed, we do. Yeah, the spiders.
Hmm.
The good news is that if a spider is generally you can see it, it's harmless despite how big
Yeah,
it is. It's the ones that you can't see that'll kick your ass.
it's the
They're
ones
the
that you
ones that.
step on or that are in your shoe, like the recluses. And you guys do have recluses, right? And
So are they black widows or is it different recluses or?
similar. You know what? Maybe they don't. Maybe you guys don't have them, but like no recluse spiders. They're just really venomous, but they're it's not like a black widow that's neurotoxin. It causes like necrotizing fasciitis, so they bite you and then you kind of like rot around it.
We call them
Really like
whitetail.
really
Yeah,
yeah, really nasty things. But I
yeah,
don't
and
know.
they're
You know, it's
erratic.
and it's you know in and even in discussing things like that, it's a blessing that I get to be inside and create music and talk about things like art because I could just as easy be having to hunt for food or building shelter or something. So I think it's important to exercise that part of your brain that needs to be creative to feel fulfilled as a creature on this planet.
You raise a great point there, which is that you might have access to all of these great features and characteristics of civilization, but you are a born musician, and by saying that, you need to be able to tour. So it must be having a huge impact on you all, the band I'm talking about, as it is with every other significant touring act. So I answer this question or otherwise. Honestly, there's never any pressure with on my show, effectively. But how tough is it at the moment financially for you guys through this period?
Um, we've been blessed to have a long time ago, due to health concerns, with our former singer, we changed a lot of our business model to not be super heavy involved in touring. But I mean, you're talking about, income losses of 150%, of what you would typically, the revenues you would generate. And we were a band that put a lot of money that we made from touring back into the tour, back into production, into crew and things like that. So um but it's rough. It's rough because it's such a narrow sort of outlet of expression in terms of like I think it's driven us to be more creative in the music we make because we don't have that outlet of expression through live music. But I can say that it's much harder for bands that are just starting their careers. It's much harder for people that are like full-time touring techs and things like that. It sucks. And I think at the same time, once it's safe to do so and things start reopening, I think live music is going to have such a live moment and it's going to see such a huge resurgence because people all over the world kind of it's one of those things that's always there. It's like the movie theater or the bowling alley. It's always there. So you take it for granted and then it's closed for a year. And I like the only time I go bowling is like on my birthday, but I want to go to the bowling alley. I want to buy a
Mm.
pitcher of beer and just suck at bowling. Like it's and I think a lot of people with live music especially are really kind of pining for it. So I think it'll be a really cool thing when it comes back once it's safe to do so, of course.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Would the EP have come about if it weren't for COVID?
Definitely. There definitely would have been new music because we always working on music. There's not a time where we're not. Um, I think it would have everything would have been different. Like just everything about everything. So it's hard to say, but um no, I mean our creative output, I feel like would it's hard to say, it's hard to say
Yeah.
what the schedule would look like. It's hard to say how much time we'd have to sit and work on things, or when things would be scheduled. Because a lot of time that's what dictates it. Um, So it's kind of, it's a bit antithetical to be a full-time touring band, and now it's like, oh well, now you're actually a full-time studio musician, so do that. It's like, oh, okay. I mean, that's the fun part. Touring's the hard part.
Yeah.
Touring's hard. It's hard on your body, it's hard on your mental health, it's hard on just your back. So but I think everything in life is a certain bittersweetness to it. And I think that with the bitter comes the sweet, and you have to decide what flavor you're going to focus on, because you're always going to have the bitter and you're always going to have the sweet there. And I think for me, for us as a band, it was as soon as we realized there wasn't going to be touring, it was like, all right, let's all get our studios all set up. Let's all get our Zooms all interconnected. Let's get the software going, and let's do this thing, because what else are we going to do?
Such a great way to end the call from the perspective of that advice you're giving to people. Life is what you make of it. Take a growth mindset and be as positive as you can, no matter what the outlook is. And I think you guys are a living example of that through Timeless. And I host a podcast series, so if it's cool, I'll release our audio for the podcast. But I think some people at the moment, of course, we aren't really. I'm not saying we're not affected by the lockdowns, but we've had minimal ones here, thank God. But
Mm-hmm.
I know people in the United States who listen, which is well over half of the audience that I have, and a lot of people in Europe, they've been suffering through this fucking thing,
Mm-hmm.
using drugs and alcohol in order to escape, I'm sure. And
Oh
I
yeah.
think I think if you can, and something else you said through there, just that 15 minutes of creativity every day, just find something that gives you a bit of an outlet, so as you're not so it gives you some insulation from what's going on.
Yeah, and it's something I think that ties us to the past as a species, that there is a part of our brain that is crucial to our survival that in this day and age doesn't need to be exercised for survival. And I think that
Yeah,
it's
so
it's
true.
it's something that's very, at least for me personally, is very grounding. um which that to me is what I need a lot of times. Like I need to not be in my head philosophizing about things. I need to be like outside doing. The verb do is really important. I think people need to do, and I think people need to do with creativity.
Absolutely agreed. Yeah, sage words, wise advice, mate. Thanks so much for the conversation. Truly
I
hope to
made
see
all
you
I
again
made all
soon.
that up. It's actually, I made it all up. It's meaningless. Doesn't mean a damn thing. I'm just kidding.
Well, people can take it as they will. I think it's great advice, regardless. But look, congratulations, seriously, on an epic career so far, and stepping up as you did. That sort of stuff is what I say to people. Hey, you don't think you can do it? I'm sure you knew you could do it beforehand, but if anybody has any doubts, they've just got to look at what you've done from a musical perspective and apply that in other aspects of their life where they might need to step up too.
Just focus on the intention, because you can't do anything to affect the outcome as much as you can to affect the intention of why you're doing something. And I appreciate, man. Like seriously, your words are humbling. It's easy
It's all
to
good.
feel, and they're validating. It's easy to feel. The only reason I ever like made music or put songs out in the world ever was because it's my message in a bottle. That's my communication. That's the language I speak. And to hear that it resonates with you and that it resonates with other people, like that's all you can ask for. All entertainment does, the only reason why entertainment exists is to try and just alleviate a little bit of human suffering. And I think one of the biggest
So
things,
true.
one of the worst things that a human being can feel is alone or feeling isolated. And I think if music can break down that boundary and just aid in suffering just a little bit, then it's awesome, because music did that for me. And at the same time, that's not like a super altruistic thing. I'm not a saint for doing that. It's just, it's, as a human being, that's all you kind of want, right? It's just some sort of connection. So it's awesome that it's connected, and I cannot wait to come back and talk about the next EP once it's done. It's honestly, it's like it's really crazy. Like I just tell people all the time, like you can honestly do anything, and it's you could, as as long as you have the willpower. It sounds so cliche. I sound like a GI Joe cartoon or something, but it's like it's kind of true. It's and I think some of the best like best version of clarity that I ever have is while I'm doing something creative, because there's other parts of your brain that are activated. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of people that have done that through quarantine. There's a lot of people that have like redecorated their homes or learned to cook or done other things. And I think
Great. Yeah.
Perspective is everything because you can't control what's going to happen. Human beings, we have one tiny little thing we control, and it's this little lens that we get to focus on either the light things in the frame or the dark things in the frame. And it's up to us to keep that in focus, keep what we decide in focus, because there's always negative in everything. I just moved into a wonderful new apartment, and one of the first things that happened is it flooded, and then I stepped on a broken glass. And it's like, there's always going to be bullshit.
The yin and the yang.
You just gotta focus on the positives. It's like, 'cause there's always going to be negatives, and that's not any kind of existence I want to live. But I do plenty of negativity.
Well, there's a lot of positivity out there, brothers. So look, I'll wrap things up. I've got to head to the next one actually at 10 because these mornings are full on, But
there you go.
But look, thanks so much for the conversation, and good luck with everything. And no doubt I'll be in touch in the near future if we don't chat.
Thank you.
Due to another fantastic release.
Hey, thank you so much. We will chat. Absolutely. Thanks for covering the band and for like the poignant conversation.
Awesome, man. Thanks for the feedback. Love it.
Take care. Have a good one.
You too, man. Catch ya. You've been listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast series. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith, and that interview subject was Aaron Pauley from the group of Mice and Men. Thanks so much for tuning in.